Hi everyone, today is Monday, September 17th, and hope you all had a beautiful day, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world today. This video is actually going to be a response to um, the experience of racial profiling that was experienced by filmmaker Tyler Perry. Actually, just some news came to me to say that Tyler Perry was in Atlantic City, some place like that, and he was apparently pulled over because he was driving a nice vehicle and there was absolutely nothing on him. You know, we hear about these stories over and over and over again. It happens in Ontario, Canada, where they're very, very sophisticated about it. And it's not just with vehicles, but for example, in some of my other videos, there's so many different variations of this thing called racial profiling. There's racial profiling according to material stuff. There's racial profiling according to social location. There's racial profiling according to sort of career status. There's racial profiling according to medicalization. Like, there's so many different variations of this stuff. And at what point does it stop? So it was actually brought to my attention that Tyler Perry was actually, and for those of you who don't know who this is actually a black filmmaker in the United States who produces a lot of stuff that's sort of within a context that he's comfortable engaging with. I've sort of explored different things around his angles, and I certainly have my perspectives. But in relation to the topic around racial profiling, how do you deal with this? One of the things that we have to do is we have to actually collaborate as a community and say, okay, you know what? We need to actually step it up a notch. I personally don't believe that violence is the solution for anything out there, because if you actually resort to a form of violence, then you're actually reproducing the colonization that actually degraded, including the black community. So, for example, one of the things that black feminism talks about, especially from the USA lineage, is that it says, you know what, you have to actually contextualize this stuff and say, okay, how do you actually respond to this systemic? For example, if we bring in sort of an anti-oppression perspective to things, one of the problems, for example, in the women's movement is that the women's movement may look at the situation and say, okay, you know what, let's have our hands flailing and let's all go, you know, party with like condom on ourselves and, you know, just put ourselves out there in these ways that were incredibly, incredibly offensive to, for example, the Black Holocaust experience. So, in relation to, for example, the situation that happened with Tyler Perry, one of the things that we should actually do is we should actually start collaborating around some policy solutions. Because, for example, if you look at, let's take NAFTA, for example, and I haven't really seen the statistics yet coming from Mexico with respect to racialized communities and how they experience racial profiling. But from Canada and USA, within the NAFTA region, how many of those who experience racial profiling are white people? For example, you have somebody like filmmaker Michael Moore. He's got very critical stuff as well, but his stuff is very different from Tyler Perry's. But how many times has he been racially profiled? Right? And how is, for example, Michael Moore coming to Tyler Perry's defense to say, okay, you know what we're going to do is we're actually going to align our following so that we work towards policy change, and let's address this from the whole NAFTA region. We can't forget about Mexico, but we can't forget about Canada either. A lot of problems in Canada. For example, Michael Moore made this beautiful piece about problems with medicine in his movie called Sicko. But if you actually see what's happening to the black community around racial profiling related to medicine, it's even more disgusting than what was actually shown in that movie by Michael Moore. And personally, Michael Moore didn't even do justice to the black community when he actually spoke about the Canadian model of something called health and care. Take a look into what has happened to black folk just in medicine, Western medicine, and then you'll see how problematic that movie was, Sicko. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to collaborate around policy solutions. We need new laws that actually respond to this. And we have to address this thing called nepotism because, for example, if we look, for example, in the NAFTA region, we see that a lot of people related to, in employment related to peace officer services, they're Caucasian. It's Caucasianized. And so that is an example of discrimination and processes that need to be re-examined. If it's not Caucasianized, then the other problem is that it may be diverse, but everybody thinks the same. So there's no diversity of ideas, and ideas come in all shapes, sizes, ages, abilities, social locations, etc. So, I have to say that I can't say I'm sorry for Tyler Perry's experience because people are apologetic that way. They say, oh, I'm sorry, so that it sort of floats away, but they go back and they do it over and over again. And for me to say that I'm sorry about his experience is patronizing his experience. So I just want to say to Tyler Perry, it's really, really disgusting what they did to you. And, it's also very telling of, for example, a lot of problems in the Western Hemisphere, and also the need for solutions that reach this range that address Western Hemispheric stuff. Maybe we need, like, for example, trade agreement courts, because obviously the court system in the United States and the court system in the Canadian state and the court system in the Mexican state, it's not enough. So maybe we need to sort of collaborate all of those resources and say, okay, we're going to actually create this NAFTA court, and we're going to process these things so that we can bring like ideas to the world bodies around different models to destabilize these very, very unstable systems. This is a type of analysis that black feminism actually goes into. It goes into model things. It doesn't just go into, as a matter of fact, it doesn't at all go into tearing off your bra and you're walking around with fucking condoms or whatever. It doesn't do shit like that. It actually goes into stuff related to including systems and looking at systems as viruses and attacking those viruses and destabilizing them so that the virus is actually blown out of the universe. So my sentiments to Tyler Perry, and that's really sad, really, really sad. I think it's really embarrassing that, for example, they can do something like that. Racial profiling is not nice. It hurts people's feelings. It's very degrading. And for example, like myself here, I mean, this is from racial profiling. And, I don't do anything related to drugs. I'm actually quite different from that kind of stuff. But this is racial profiling. So how do we start making sense of this stuff? Well, one way we can do this is we can say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to start doing some policy and new law change. And you know what? Maybe we should start like looking at remodeling certain systems through black entertainment. Thanks for watching, and hope y'all are okay out there.